Shadowing opportunity allows the scholar to get a better understanding of what it is that professional does in their day. They act as a bit of an eye on the wall. It's about learning through your interests. That hour and a half is invaluable, and you've had an opportunity to learn, to see different skills, to practice different skills, to see what you like, what you don't like, what you think you can do, what you think you don't want to do. And so what I like about scholars getting the opportunity to see different snippets of different careers is that they get a chance to explore and maybe see something that they had never considered about that profession.
Young people can't really aspire to things if they can't imagine them. And so when they get a chance to get outside of the walls of the classroom, outside the walls of the school, see what it is that real adults actually do, that enables them to imagine themselves in that. And they may come back and say, wait a minute, that's not what I thought it was. It's not the way that lawyers are portrayed on TV. Maybe that's not what I want to do. Or they may come back and say, whoa, I didn't realize that within a hospital there are people who work in communications, marketing, engineering, beyond just being a doctor. So it can open up whole new areas of possibility for them when they think about what kinds of future careers and who they want to be as adults in the future.
Scholars practice their social skills. So in terms of working with strangers, eye contact, verbal communication, nonverbal communication, we're really big on that. They also work through some of their nerves. Professionals really love having scholars present because it allows them to get involved. And scholars get really excited. They love seeing the behind the scenes because it's not an opportunity they've had.
It really puts you out there, and it may make you uncomfortable in some situations, but I feel like it's great practice for the real world.
So typically the shadowing experience is an hour and a half. We really don't want to inconvenience or bother professionals. We get that they have things they have to do. What we have noticed is there have been numerous times where the professionals were like, if you want, you can stay longer. It's really lovely when that happens organically and the professional sees the value of having the student on site. So the first step is interest exploration. It's really important for us that scholars pursue their interests and hobbies that they're passionate about.
They made us do surveys on the laptops, and those surveys ask like a bunch of questions of like, are you social? Do you like art? Would you like to work in business? How do you feel working in an office? So we did a lot of those surveys, and it gave us like a chart of what your interests are and like something that you might want to do in the future. And I feel like that really helped me as well. Like, oh, maybe I'll try this out. And that's when I started trying different things.
We have students come up with questions of careers that they're interested in. So for instance, if a student is interested in becoming a vet, we have them come up with a bunch of different questions. How did you get to be a vet? What led you to this point? What's your favorite part of their day? Or your day. And we have them compile a massive list of questions.
We have something called community mapping. And the community mapping process is when they brainstorm, what are all the opportunities in my community related to my talents and interests? How far am I willing to go? Is it 3-mile radius from my house? Is it a 5-mile radius? What are my parents willing to do? And then they make lists and they Google, they go on Yelp and they plot where all of these locations are. And then they decide who they're going to reach out to.
And they really try and learn about that organization. So when they make that kind of cold call and then they get a hit, they can have some conversation about the organization because they know a little bit more.
They also use advisory to work on their resumes. And that's really interesting because when they have to work on their resume, they have to talk about themselves. So sometimes we have to push through of the difficulty of, well, like, what have I done? What are my strengths? What have I accomplished? And a lot of emotions come through that. So we work on what's that about? And then we are able to unearth some of their skills, some of their talents, some of their objectives as well. What is it that they're hoping to pursue? We also talk about, okay, what's it like in terms of talking to somebody new, right? The differences in talking to your peers versus talking to an adult. They have to like introduce themselves. They have to ask permission, like, is now a good time to talk? And a lot of the times now with texting, our students haven't practiced those skills. Skills that they take for granted, introducing themselves, making sure to say please and thank you or have a nice day. And because of all the scholars together, they help each other out. They practice with each other. And we often have scholars who have already done this. They learn better with one another, and then they can coach one another. And at times we've had students who have just blanked out or who have started crying, like it was just too difficult. They had the support of their peers to help them out, help them breathe, take a break, and then they coach them through it.
Well, I've actually helped a lot of people with their shadow calls and all that, and I gave them a lot of advice to just be calm. It's not as bad as it looks, and some people do have more anxiety than others, but I make sure to prepare them. It's okay. It's just for a few minutes of your life. Know what you're gonna say, and if something goes wrong, it's okay. It's not the end of the day. It's not the end of the world. It'll be fine.
And then we have them tasked with the very difficult part of calling people. In the beginning, it's really difficult. It's like, oh, I don't want to call, or I'm nervous. I don't want to call in front of my peers. But we start supporting them and we get them through this process. And then once they feel they're ready, we have them call a random business. Google a vet in Paramount. And so they'll just call. And you can hear they're stumbling, especially when they're freshmen. But as they're doing this, they're able to make the phone call and they get more confident. So when you hear our sophomores make the phone call, they're like, okay, I called, and they'll call 4 or 5 businesses in a day.
So the first thing is hey, can we do an informational interview? I'm just really curious about your career. So it's a little hook, right?
And if that phone call goes extremely well, thank you so much for teaching me about your job. And then they ask the question, do you mind if I come by tomorrow and watch you work for an hour? So we try to make it as seamlessly as possible. I learned so much from you. I think it'd be extremely helpful if I learned more about your job.
A lot of times it happens, it works, and the professional says, yeah, sure. Sometimes, unfortunately, when scholars are asking for a shadowing opportunity, it doesn't go through. Our scholars are disappointed, they're sad, and then we loop back around. What's great is because we've done this whole search of interest exploration, and we've done a bit of a community mapping of the different companies or agencies that tie into the interest. We already have another place. We already have another company or another professional that we want to call in. So they're a bit disappointed. We work through those feelings. And then we gear them up. Okay, how are we gonna make this one work? What's this one about? So then we're prepared to call the next professional.
That's something I really appreciate about my advisors, is that they didn't give up. See, I wanted to give up finding a baker. I was like, I'm not gonna find anything. Nobody wants to take me. But they refused to just let me give up and do something that I didn't really want to do.
We're always trying to make sure that we are making these opportunities convenient for the professionals. So we check in with the professionals, what time is best, what's most convenient. We also want it to occur during the school day. If parents can't take the scholar to the shadowing opportunity, somebody at the school makes it happen. Sometimes our scholars have gone during the weekend and they've been able to do that, and parents have been able to take them. So that works as well.
If you're a teacher who's never done something like this before, the opportunity to contact someone in a career field totally different than your own can really be an amazing opportunity. If you've ever had that curiosity of what does an architect really do? What does it feel like to try to get ready to run a restaurant for the day? This is your chance to go in and peek into the work world of someone else and find out, what might it be like? This does two things. One, it helps them to understand what the experience will be like for their students. They can then empathize with, yeah, I was a little anxious when I tried this myself. It was a little scary to go walk in and introduce myself. But second, it helps those teachers to think about their own teaching and practice in the classroom. How can they make sure that the content they're presenting is then connected to those real world careers that are going on out beyond the walls of the school?
Once scholars present themselves to the company, they have to practice their social skills all over again. They look at the professional in the eyes, they make eye contact, they shake their hands, which is not always easy.
The process preparing for Shadow Day, it's a bit, I was a bit nervous because I'm like, how am I gonna walk in there and they're not gonna know who I am, so I had to make sure I'm known, right? I was just like, ooh, give myself a little pep talk before I went in. I was like, you got this. So that's how I prepared.
First year, I was trying to find an architect's intern, and then now I took a month to find one in LA. For a job shadow, they took me to one of their projects that was currently being built, and then we walked around the house, and they were explaining little details, and then there we went to their office, and then they showed me what they work on.
I walked in, introduced myself to the owner of the bakery, and gave her my resume. This particular Shadow Day, it was more of just seeing everything she was doing. So she was actually frosting a cake the entire time we were there and asking us questions like, why do you want to do this? Or stuff like, what was the last thing that you baked? And she would just ask us a few questions and gave us a little rundown of what it's like at the business.
I think ultimately we didn't know what we were getting into. Gio gave us a call on a busy day and I answered the phone and I figured it was, just some kid looking for an internship. I figured he must have been college age because he was very, well-spoken and knew what he wanted. Then I realized he wanted to come shadow us for a day and I figured there would be no harm in that. As we started to get to know each other through email and through the phone, we had developed what we thought would be a great curriculum for that Shadow Day, where he came and visited our construction site and then came and visited the office and saw the drawings and the models that went into creating the project that was currently under construction. And I think it was at that moment that we realized that Gio was awesome and he would be a lot of fun to have around for these next few months.
We do a debrief. It's more of an informal process where we're like, okay, how did that go? How did you feel? And then we reflect on what they did really well. What are they still curious about? What's something they wish they would have been able to ask or do? What's their takeaway? What were the strengths? What were the good things that you did? And what's one thing you could improve for next time? And so we use those key points to then follow up on the next mentorship or shadow opportunity. I think for a student to present about their different shadowing opportunities on their own, that would be a good way to go about it, and it might also be a little intimidating, right? Maybe grouping scholars with one another about, okay, this is how all of my shadowing opportunities went. These were my strengths, and these were the things that my growth areas that I need to grow on. Because then I think that if they were in groups, maybe say in groups of 2s or 3s, then it would make them feel less isolated. And what's great about grouping scholars together is that they can also work with each other on developing strategies or ways they can correct it the next time. The other thing I really like about scholars working with one another, peers listen to one another's advice more so than they would adults' advice. There was one instance where, unfortunately, a music studio was really, really keen on taking in some students. I've never seen these students so jazzed. They're usually some of our quieter students. They were really, really jazzed. And they presented themselves there. And they waited an hour and a half in the lobby. The kids were so deflated. Our students were so deflated. Parents were deflated for them because their child had shown such a keen interest, so a reserved child that doesn't really talk and shown such a keen interest. I think the person that was in charge of receiving them was really keen on having them there. But the rest of the studio was like, oh, wait, these are minors. There's adults here in the studio, and sometimes whether it be the language or the behavior, it might not be appropriate for minors. And so troubleshooting that one was a bit difficult because we didn't know it was going to happen, and it happened on a weekend. But now we know how to prepare our students and also how to prepare the companies receiving the students. Another thing that we've come across, sometimes it's confusion in the schedule, or something's come up for the professional. And so we try, as much as possible, we are flexible. So if we get a time change, we adjust. If something's come up because one employee isn't available, we try and see if it's possible to match with another employee. We really make it so that we are making the experience as convenient as possible for our mentors so that they'll want to get involved into the community. Sometimes our professionals are like, why do I have to fill out this document? Or why do I have to do this sort of thing? And we really try and explain to them, we're working with young people and we want to make sure that they're safe. And because the professionals are so empathic, we connect with them on a level of pretend your young child or your niece or nephew is going into a company. You'd want them to be safe. And they get it. The students sometimes give a lot of pushback because they're nervous initially. This is prior to the shadowing happening. They get nervous and they'll sometimes say, why do I have to do this? I don't want to do this. I don't want to learn anything. And what I suggest is gently help the scholar towards doing that shadowing opportunity, because most oftentimes they come back completely hyped, excited, and wanting to pursue either another shadow opportunity or wanting to pursue that as an internship. So yeah, sometimes you might get pushback from the students, but it's just because they're nervous. And once they go through it, they love it. They actually really love learning outside of school.
I think there's a lot of students just like me who can't really picture themselves in their future, unsure of what it is they really want to do or pursue, especially with college, coming up, having to pick a major and things like that. It's a great way to explore things and really see your options, see all the different ways you can go. Yeah, so that's why I'd recommend it. Yeah.
You might be the first person who says to a kid in a school, tell me who you are. And really, who are you? What's your life like? What are you interested in? So I think that's really vitally important when you hear about programs that are engaging young people's interests, that are helping them go out into the world and have those experiences. It can really shape their lives and their entire community.